Shit's gone sideways.
Right, well, let's kick into it. So, Gayle, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
As I was saying to you before we started recording, at the moment, the Shit's Gone Sideways podcast has been mainly either crime stories or it has been people talking about major health complications that they had in their life and how they recovered from those, or religious stories. And when it's come to religious stories, it seems like the organisation, the non-profit organisation that you work with, Recovering from Religion, seems to have a bit of a monopoly on these stories, right?
I guess I'm proud of that.
Of these fascinating stories. So, yes, we've had already Sasha D'Souza and we've had Naomi Mura on, and they've talked about their experiences with how growing up in the Jehovah's Witness community, kind of what that was like, and also their life since leaving that. It's also interesting to have someone on to talk about religious experiences, which is not from Jehovah's Witness at all, but from Southern Baptists. Now, I must admit, I know absolutely nothing about Southern Baptists.
I know far too much.
So, were you born into
Yes.
Southern Baptists?
Oh, yes. That's for generations back. So it was just an accepted lifestyle.
And where did you grow up?
In the southeast United States,
Yep.
mostly in Georgia.
Yeah. And big family?
A couple of brothers,
Yep.
but we were in church every time the doors were open. That's everybody's pedigree, is that every time the doors were open in the church, you're there.
What's every day of the week?
It's open. No, it's mostly Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, and then there's always an additional night for a small group Bible study in someone's home.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's pretty consuming lifestyle.
And what were the other rules that we would surprise us outside
Well,
of
this was do you know what I mean? It's maybe an American expression. Do you know what being a teetotaler is? I don't
non-drinker?
Yeah, non-drinker. No alcohol at all. Or the joke was Baptists don't drink with other Baptists. And so, yes, there was drinking, but it was completely prohibited by the religion. And then a conservative lifestyle. No, it's a narrow path to conformity. You can't divert off of that path. You need to be normal. You need to be heterosexual. You need, there's a whole lot of things. No sexual activity before marriage. All of the usual controlling religious rules was part of the Southern Baptist lifestyle.
But was it for you at the time? Was it still a happy upbringing?
In the context of when you're living in that lifestyle and when you're conforming, you feel like you're in a happy lifestyle. You're getting those dopamine hits of approval from your community. You're doing the right thing. You're there in church. You're doing work in the church that you're supposed to do. It feels happy. It feels good to conform. It feels good to have that stroking of what you're doing.
Yeah.
You don't spend a lot of time reflecting on what other things could I be doing? You just don't do that. You don't have the time or the inclination or the interest to reflect on that.
What about at school? Were you associating with people that weren't from Southern Baptist?
There would have been a variation on the theme. In the southeastern United States, it's a highly religious place. So while they may not have been Southern Baptists, they were certainly religious. I did not know people who were not religious. When I was a child, when I was a young adult, throughout my children's childhood, I wasn't exposed to people who were non-believers.
So there wasn't that scope to have conversations with other kids who were like, your life seems crazy compared to mine.
None of that. None of that kind of perspective. No. And then,
so
how'd the shit go sideways?
Yeah.
So I have a big family. I have 4 children, and I had all 4 of them in 3 years. I threw doubles the last time, so I had 4 children in 3 years. Awesome. Wow. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody, but I loved it. I loved everything about it. I loved raising them. I loved taking care of them. I loved doing the home. We were very traditional. My then husband was first he was a military pilot, and then he was a commercial pilot, and we were as square as it gets.
And he was Southern Baptist
and
as
he was Southern Baptist as well, and we were bringing the children up in the church in every leadership role we could possibly have.
How did you guys meet, you and your husband?
At a Baptist summer camp.
That checks out.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Tracks. So life was good. We were bringing the children up, teaching them the Bible stories, doing everything that we were supposed to do. And when those 4 children, as I said, they were close in age, when they got to be young teenagers, 12 and 13, they came to me with, and I expected them to come to me with these questions, with normal religious teenager questions. Every religious teenager asks it in some context, questioning the anti-science in the Bible, the boat with all the animals and the 6,000-year-old earth, and then some immoral Bible passages about when God would command a group of Israelites to go and take land and to keep the young women for your treasure. Or there was even one passage in Numbers about bashing the infants' heads on rocks, because when you overtake a land, God commands you to completely overtake it. There's passages like that in the Bible which you don't ever hear about. But
No.
and my kids came to me, and I said, "Children, you're right." Now this was. I'm sort of condensing it. This was over a long period of time. We would have a family Bible study, and as I said, my then husband was a commercial airline pilot, so he wasn't always there for the Bible study.
Sure.
So
But did
we
you
would
think
be
in your head when they're asking these questions that you had, because of your upbringing, you had been trained in the answers to provide?
So I gave them the answers. I said, "Children, good question and good thinking," because I had taught these children. It was an exception, but I valued education. I highly valued education. I had an undergraduate degree. My then husband was an educated person, and I did value education. So when these children had these questions, I was proud of them for asking, and I said, "We're going to find the answers." So the first place we went was within what I call within the bubble. We went to our youth minister and our pastor and our Sunday school teacher, and we asked those questions. Religion has answers to those questions. They're terrible answers. They're very unsatisfying, but they are some kind of answer to it. It's God's ways are higher than our ways. There are things about God we'll never understand. And then you're supposed to go, "Oh," and let it go and move on with your life.
That's right. You're supposed to give some vague answer,
that's
and then
right.
we just move on.
Yes, and then we just move on. And my kids were, hell no. That it was just not enough. And I said, "Okay, well, let's keep asking our questions." I engaged my husband at the time, and I said, "The kids are asking these questions, and I'm struggling with it a little bit." We've met with our youth pastor, and he said, "You are playing with fire." Told me that was the expression he used, "You're playing with fire." And ultimately, he ended up being right. But it was just funny that he didn't even want me to entertain the questions.
Yeah.
Because I guess he's,
I mean, what's the deal? Your kids are just far too inquisitive for their own good.
That's the joke. That's what we've said. Stupid kids asking all these questions. So they were, as I said, I'm condensing the story down, but over the course of the years now, they were starting high school. They were becoming older teenagers, middle-aged teenagers. And they were starting high school. They were being exposed to people with different beliefs. Our little small elementary school, everybody was exactly the same. But even in the South, there was a little bit of just somebody different at the high school, and they were starting to be exposed to that. And in the meantime, we were reading things. We studied a little bit about anthropology and philosophy and other religions. And boy, once you crack the bubble, once you crack or break the seal, it was inevitable. And each of my children, each one according to their personality and their birth order, they were not as vested in me. So they were ready. They were just, this is unacceptable. They're not going, my oldest son, he I tell a little bit of a story about him. His was all wrapped around sexuality, and he discovered what sex was, and the idea that we would not want him to do that was more than he could take. My second son was more right. So, and my second son was more cerebral, and he did more of the study. One of my daughters, she said it has nothing to do with whether or not it's true. I could care less if it's true or not. It's immoral. It's a terrible system. It's a tribal system where you only protect and care about the people that believe the same way you do and not outside of that. So each one of them had their own reasons.
Yeah, wow. It wasn't like they were all conspiring together.
No, and they were making their progress on their own. My husband conflict was building in the marriage because he was holding me accountable for having let them ask these questions and entertaining them. And so shit started to go sideways. So the children were ready to walk away. And each one, as they got old enough to say, "I'm not going to church, I'm not going to believe this," they started doing that. And then they launched off into their lives. So over those years, as they made their decisions, and I was becoming more and more panicked because they were the only people I knew that didn't believe, that I had ever had any exposure to. So as they started to leave me, and I know and I want them to launch. I want them to do their lives. And yet at the same time, I am feeling more and more isolated and panicked because I hadn't decided to leave. First of all, my entire world was built around church, my community, my marriage, all of my friends, all of my belief system. And as the kids were leaving, I thought, I'm going to do a thing. I'm going to let them do their thing, but I'm going to stay in. I had let go, I think, of the belief. I think I had discarded that, but I was going to go through the motions. I was going to continue to teach Sunday school.
So they're having all these individual questions, and you were obviously put in a difficult position where you love your kids and you're wanting to support them on whatever journey that is. But then, at what point did you start to say to yourself, okay, the questions they're asking are actually very important questions that I maybe need to ask myself?
Well, I'm not proud of it, but I accepted that the beliefs were probably not true. I accepted that there was probably no afterlife. I accepted that I agreed with one of my girls that it's not a moral system. I'm not proud of it, but I love my house and I love my husband. I loved my husband. I love my life. I love my friends, and I love my community. And yes, I wanted the children to launch and go live their lives, but I still had the rest of my life to do. You know, I'm only 45 or whatever I was at the time.
Yeah.
And I made the decision, I know I can fake this. I can do this. I can go to church. I can sing the songs. I can be happy with my husband. I can vicariously enjoy my kids living their lives. And I thought I could do that.
Did your husband, did that affect his relationship with the kids?
A little bit. Yeah, the gap that exists even now between the children and their dad, they each manage it in their own way, and I won't I don't interfere in any of that, and they have a relationship with him, but it's not very deep. Because when you leave religion and you're a true believer, everything changes for you. How you want to live your life, what your morality is, what your sexuality is, all the pieces, what you want to do for fun, what legacy you want to live, all of that changes. And so the children are quite different than their father in what they value and how they want to live their lives. So they have a relationship with them. It's doesn't have a lot of conflict in it, but it doesn't have a lot of conflict in it because they live a continent away from one another, and there's only so far that they can go in their conversation with him. And in the South, we learn to be very social, so we can talk around it and above it and not go into it. So that's what we do.
Yeah, it sounds like they can be civil, but there'd be so much about their life that they can't even touch on.
That they can't share, that they can't talk about, that he would disapprove of, that it makes him uncomfortable, that they don't really want to share with him because they don't want the judgment. They don't. Anyway, it's all part of the package.
Do any of your children identify as LGBT?
They don't, but they're all they're all polyamorous, which is a whole different piece of sexuality. So they each have long-term partners, and they each manage it differently. There's 1,000 different ways to be non-monogamous.
They're all polyamorous?
Well, they're not. Let me say it this way: polyamory is a certain specific word. They're all ethically non-monogamous, and so without getting into detail of each one of their lives, they've each managed to do that in the way that works for them and their partners.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Isn't it? I know.
But
I know.
It's also fascinating that that's happening with that level of strike rate among your kids.
Right?
It's interesting that they were all went on this journey of questioning and then leaving, and then also on top of that they're also ethical non-monogamous.
And it's interesting when we gather together, and the children, we're all very close. We do vacations together, and we would almost rather spend time with one another than anything because of our shared history, and the topic will come up. And it is, sometimes I just sit there in awe of listening to them because they just edged away from the amount of baggage that I carried away from it. I still have to deal with it. They were young enough and they discarded it early enough, and their minds were open enough that it just astounds me how I think about I think about what it's like to be raised without the impact of religious beliefs. What a gift that is. And while they had it as children, it didn't imprint on them like it did if you marinated in it for all of those years. And so it stuns me when I hear them have their conversation and how wide open they are and how rational they are and how their humanism feeds into the decision making that they do.
It must feel pretty cool for you as a mum that you have this close relationship with all of them, and you can talk openly with them about their lives in a way which your husband can't, and you couldn't if you had not left the religion
it's the
as well.
biggest pleasure of my life. It's that I can talk to the kids, that they're willing to share with me. Sometimes I'm astounded at what they're willing to share with me, how open they are, because that's a relic of religiosity that I struggle with. Is, you're going to talk to me about your sex life, and then they talk to me about their sex life, and it's such a privilege.
I mean, that seems to be a very common theme among a lot of people that you would come across with recovering from religion, that once they left whatever religion they were a part of, a lot of them have either very, very one-dimensional or non-existent relationships with their families.
Oh, it's one of the saddest things that we see, Andrew, when people come to us at recovering from religion, and it's a process. It's not an event. So when they come to us, sometimes they've done what I did early on. They've done the heavy emotional lifting of discarding the belief, but all of the trappings, all of the external, you have to deal with and you have to put somewhere. And the fractured relationships have to be managed. You have to face the reality of it. Sometimes you transition through being sad about that and the grief and the loss to some joy about that because you don't have that burden. And sometimes it's vice versa. So everyone's journey, the thing that we have learned at Recovering from Religion is everybody's journey is unique. Everybody's comes with certain challenges. The consistency is that it takes a while. It's sometimes protracted. It doesn't happen overnight. You just don't stop believing and then get on with your life and live a different way. It's and for some it's quite arduous.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of differences in everyone's stories, but then there also seems to be that there's a lot of commonalities as well.
Oh yeah.
Right, people that have all had this. Negative experiences of the fallout of leaving their religion, of just people that they hold close to their heart, just not being not having that have that relationship.
And in my opinion, this is just my opinion. I think it takes work to learn how to be a humanist. Humanism is a philosophy. It's about human-centered compassion, and that doesn't happen overnight. In fact, in my tough year that I alluded to, when I didn't quite finish that story, but when I made the decision, I'm going to fake this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to just go forward, that lasted a year. And it was a dark, dark year for me because I was drinking a lot and making some bad judgments. And I didn't know how to be a humanist. I didn't know how to figure out my morality. All I knew was everything that I had believed in up to that point was gone. Okay, well, now what? Well, now I'm going to fake it. And it wasn't a very joyful prospect. I loved my life and my friends, but over the course of a year, I was like, yeah, I love my life, my husband, my home, my friends, but this is some bullshit because I can't.
What was making it harder then when you were? You felt like you were living as a fraud?
There was a lot of that. I was watching my children thrive, going off and doing their lives and not being perfect, and I also was thinking about the world from a humanist perspective, and I was desperate to talk to other people about what this felt like. And I was outraged that I had been misled for so long. I was embarrassed that it took me that many years to question it. There were so many things that fed into that misery, that year of misery, that dark year, because I was not being true to myself. I was trying to make it work with my with my then husband, he was also trying, but he knew I was faking it. And so then what do we do? What do you do? What do you do? He can't. He's not ready to question. He's never questioned. In all of these years since then, he's never questioned. I couldn't go back. I couldn't unsee what I learned. I couldn't unlearn it. And it was just a mess.
I mean, we simplify it these days to calling it FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. But it sounds like when your kids were talking about this life and their adventure, and you had decided that these beliefs that you had grown up with weren't, you didn't believe them so strongly anymore or at all, that it made you wonder there's this whole adventure of the world that you know nothing about.
Was passing me by, was going to be over. Everything about it, everything, how I wanted to manage my sexuality, how I wanted to live my life, the effort, and keep in mind, because when you're a religious person that often informs your politics, I was having that transition as well. And I had lived in a marriage where we shared conservative viewpoints. And so that was falling by the wayside too. And so I couldn't find anywhere to go that was similar, that was the same as I had lived before. Everything was different.
You said that during this year when you were faking it, that you were drinking?
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, I'm a drinker, but that was a bad year. That was a bad year. It's escaping. I was just trying to make
having to keep it a secret because
yes,
oh
yeah,
because you guys don't drink, right?
We don't drink. So
and you never drunk probably in your life.
I had always been a bit of a social drinker. I'd always tasted wine, and you can do that in the Baptist lifestyle. But drinking and going out and drinking, that was completely frowned upon, and it was such one. What I have found when I share this story and other people say, oh, I had a similar experience, it was all about making the pain stop. You know what the effect of drugs and alcohol, it numbs the pain, right?
Yes.
Right.
And so you were going out, to bars, socially with non-Baptist friends, I imagine, if you had any of those?
Yes, I was involved in my community's local soccer community, and there were a few. So Southern Baptists are conservative, and there are other religions that are not quite as conservative, so they could go out and drink, so I would go out with them, and that was my portal into the world of, yes, medicating with alcohol.
I heard you allude to bad decisions during this period. What does a bad decision look like for Gayle?
Well, I had affairs.
Yeah.
That was a bad decision.
Yeah.
And in conjunction with the drinking, I was driving. Stupid, just taking unnecessary risks, but you just don't. I wasn't processing that. I wasn't putting that into perspective. So it was all a big package of behavior.
Did you think, that the affairs were partly due to the fact that you had stopped believing in the Baptist religion, and so it had made it a cause of rift between you and your husband because
there was there was that piece, but there's also the theological piece of what sin is. Sin is anything bad that you do, anything that comes between you and your relationship with God. And when I ditched that, first of all, there's no God, and secondly, so what is there? No sin? And as I said, it takes a while to learn to be a humanist. It takes a while to learn to be, what does it mean to be a moral person? I mean, I don't know if you and I could talk right now and come up with 10 things that makes a person a moral person. It's not easy.
Right. So you're talking about, if there's no hell and there's no such sinning, then what are these rules?
What's the point?
Right?
What's the point of the rules? So yes, that was part of it. Yes, was not understanding there still are rules. There are still rules. There's still you still have to work through, in my opinion, you still have to work through being a good person. So what does it mean to make a good person? What do you do in your community that makes you a good person? Well, certainly drinking and driving does not make you a good person. I'm not judging the drinking parties even as much as I am the high-risk behavior of putting other people at risk. That's immoral. That's not being a good person. That's humanism 101, and I didn't even know how to think that way. I was just so stuck in the mindset. And when I ditched the God piece and the sin piece, I spent a little bit of time thinking, well, there are no rules, and there's no penalty, and there's no price to pay, and we all just it's all hedonism. We just do whatever we want to, and that's not exactly right either.
No.
So it was a challenge.
But you'd gone from one end of the spectrum to the other, right?
Clearly,
and then
yes.
You're like, hold on, neither of these are correct.
Neither of these are exactly right. That's
somewhere
right.
in the middle,
and
probably,
so I reached a point. coming to terms with myself, where I was honest with myself, and I said, okay, I cannot do this anymore. So now what do I do? Well, the first thing I have to do is tell him. I have to tell him I'm not going to believe this anymore. And he had told me ahead of time, this is a deal breaker. This is a showstopper. There was no room for me not to be a believer. And when I told him I was not a believer, that was when he said, then he said, I'm going to divorce you. And that's what happened.
Yep.
I had to tell my parents. They were religious people. My mother just wept. My sweet little Southern mother just wept. My father called me middle-aged crazy. All you want to do is go out and sleep with people. And I'm like, I didn't even tell him that part of the story. Why did you go there with that? My brothers were, just awful, just so judgmental.
And then I imagine all your friends as
all
well.
Of my
were awful?
they just are gone. They're gone. They, for a long time, I have defended them through the years because I know what I would have done if I had been in their position. And yet at the same time, we've just had this conversation. How long do we hold these people accountable? We always say, well, they don't know any better. They're indoctrinated. They believe life works in a certain way. And so we excuse them. So when all my friends fell away, I excused them because I understood why they did what they did. As time has gone on, I'm like...
Also, they're all going to choose to stay in that community, right? So no one wants to put their head above the parapet.
Hell no,
right?
Of course not, because who's going to be the one to do that? Because then you're going to get judgment, laterally from all your other people.
Yeah.
And what do they want? Why do they want to be friends with me now? Because I'm doing this bad, evil thing, and their indoctrination means that they can pray for me. They could have witnessed to me. They could have talked to me about coming back to Jesus, but they can't. They don't want to socialize with me, and I think there's a little piece of that too that they don't like. That they would not even be able to articulate this, but I'm scary because There's some rules that they don't love too, and I've said. I'm walking away from them.
Yeah, they'll label it as you can draw them towards wickedness or whatever, right?
Right.
But the reality is it's that they're afraid that whatever you've gone towards, they might like it.
Right. Like it a lot. Yes,
right?
and in the ensuing years, after I struggled through and got myself back together, I live a kick-ass life, a joyful life, a wonderful life. It wouldn't change anything about my life. It's awesome. So I never.
Sure, but that first couple of years must have been hard as shit.
It's hard. It was real hard. It was real hard. It was that the dark year, however, I consider was the worst year. Once I got through telling my husband, starting the divorce proceedings, awful, telling my parents, there was still, as sad as that was, and that was also a sad year. It still wasn't as bad as the dark year because I had hope. I had hoped that I was going to be able to.
The dark year was when you were living a lie?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, that was the worst.
Yeah.
And even though there was sorrow in the following year, and there was a lot of heartache, and my parents were so upset, and my brothers were upset, and I didn't have any friends. I didn't have, I had to rely on my kids. They were wonderful to support me, but they didn't even live there. They were off in college, and I didn't want to do that to them. I just didn't want to parent them that way. I didn't want them to have to take care of mom all the time, whatever. So
they must have shit a brick though when they heard, guess what, mom's done.
Yeah. Yes, but they were awesome because they had been saying, Mom, you can't, because they knew that whole bad year, they were like, you can't keep doing this. And they knew I wasn't making good choices. And they're like, Mom. And I was like,
all right.
I can stay. I don't have to do this today.
So they were a bit worried about you. So that must have been a huge relief for them to hear that you finally gotten the guts to,
and they
to
were
make the
supportive.
move.
They were so supportive of me. And I don't know how common it is when a middle-aged lady gets divorced. I kind of pulled myself together and started law school. It was a dream that I had always had. So I went to law school.
That's amazing. So what were you doing for employment more?
I was a
Did you have any
as a personal trainer. Yeah, I was doing some personal training, and so I had already finished my undergraduate work, but but the personal training was just an interest that I have, and so I was doing that. Loved it, but I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I didn't think my body would hold up to do that for the next 40 years, and I needed to be able to generate a revenue that would support me. I didn't want to. It was a long-term marriage in the way the family law works in the United States. I was going to have some support from him, but I really wanted just limited. I wanted support long enough to get through law school because I did want to be independent. I did want to support myself, and I was interested in practicing law and being a lawyer.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it was great.
So where'd you go to law school?
I went to Concord Law School. It's based in California, but they have an online program. They have an online version, so I was able to do all of it as I was kind of rebuilding my life together. It was great, and I'm an academic nerd, and so I loved it. Even though it was online, in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm listening to the lecture and I'm looking up the cases, and I was a weirdo about that, so loved it.
So you were like a duck to water with this. You studied it. You went well.
Very well.
Yeah.
In that law school still requires you. So in the U.S. there's no federal law license. It's all by state. And California allows you to do the law school online, but you have to travel to California to take the bar exam. So you still have that's the qualifier. Everybody you can graduate from law school and it does you not very much good. You have a law degree, but you can't practice law without the license. The license is what you get when you pass the bar exam.
Right.
So I did that and
Pass it first time?
passed it on the first go.
Nice.
Yes.
And then what happened?
And then I started practicing law. I was living in Tennessee at the time. I was still living in where we were. And then
Were you dating at this stage?
yes, I had a honey. Yes, I had a honey. Yes, I was. And then my life took a little bit of a turn because as I said, my politics got involved in this. So I ran for state office in Tennessee a couple of times. I ran in 2016 and in 2018 for a local. It's considered local. It was a state Senate position. But I ran as a Democrat, which is in the minority in the southeastern states. It's Tennessee, where I ran, has what we call a supermajority, so they completely dominated all politics. But I felt it was an important voice. I feel like I have a pretty big mouth and a pretty thick skin, and it set me up to be able to run for office pretty comfortably. I had been out and I self-identify as an atheist, and I had been that from the moment that I came out. I said this is the best description of who I am. I do not have a belief in a God or any kind of a supernatural higher power. Is the word that best fit me.
Yeah.
So it was tough to run as an atheist in a conservative religious area, but
Yeah. Did you have pushback from the...
oh hell yeah, I had a lot of pushback. I had a lot of antagonism from the other party, and of course I didn't win. And I got the 36% that we all get when we run in those areas like that for the vote. But it was a positive experience, and the positive thing was the opposing party, the highly religious party, made a big deal of my atheism. I was trying to minimize it, not because I wasn't proud of it, but because I knew it was going to be troublesome. But I also knew I couldn't hide from it. So I was trying to kind of fit it in the middle, and they came after me based on that. So they put flyers out with my face with all the ugly things.
They have, professional PR teams.
They have a squillion dollars.
Right. Well, they have experts whose job is to go
whose
right for the
full-time
jugular.
job is, and they
what
did.
What are our weaknesses?
And they did. So it was a positive experience all in all. We had some pretty positive takeaways. It allowed me to, because they focused on my non-belief, every podcast, every interview, every appearance that came up, and I was able to inform them what it means to be a humanist. I was able to inform them, I formerly did have religious beliefs. I don't any longer. And here's what I believe in. I believe that my neighbor's well-being is on me. I believe that their suffering and their happiness are connected to mine. And I think our community can be better. I think we can do better if we, all the things.
That I believe in doing positive things through action, not just going to
not
a
just
church and praying
not
for
just
them.
going to the church and praying for the people that are in that building, which was what I was trying to say.
Yeah. And so you ran twice.
I ran twice. I ran in 2016 and 2018.
Did you go any better the second time?
Nah, by a percentage, maybe. I don't know. Probably by a percentage point. But after that, and this was, I had already finished law school. I had also connected with Recovering from Religion, so I had a lot of balls in the air.
Why run? What's the motivation to run if you don't think you have much of a chance of winning anyway?
Because you have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And one of my takeaways was, the image I use is, I have always had a small farm. I always have goats and chickens, and so it's a farming image. When cattle walk between, walk up. They lay down the grass. They tramp down the grass. And when you are doing something for the first time, you're sort of laying down the grass for the people behind you. And so when you run, and you're probably not going to win, someone has to do it. And as I said, I was a good candidate to do it because I knew I could take what they dished out. And the second thing was there were people behind me, young people behind me, that I knew with time, eventually people, younger people, the demographic freight train that's building in the United States of young people who are more progressive, who are more open-minded. I knew they were behind me. And I thought, if I can do this first row of laying down the grass and getting people used to, guess what? There are non-believers among us, and I'm one of them, and you will be one of them too. And so if I could establish that and open up a pathway for those that came behind me. So that was part of my motivation.
I mean, it makes sense when you talk about it like that, like just taking a few bullets for the next person. Right?
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, and I could do that. I was in a privileged enough position to be able to sustain that.
You talked about the fact that there were people that were critical of you, but you must have had the flip side of people who they must have given you a lot of confidence that you had people come out of the woodwork to support you as well.
I had wonderful experiences of almost every time I spoke somewhere, someone would come up to me, and religion is so prevalent in the area where I was running. They would come up to me and lean in, and I knew exactly what they were going to tell me. They would lean in. I don't believe either, but I can't come out. I can't tell my mom. I'll lose my job. And it was almost every time. I had a young woman come with her two little girls, held them by the hand. They were 6 and 8, and she leaned into me and she said, "I'm a non-believer and I'm raising my children to be non-believers, and I want these girls to shake your hand." Makes me well up now to think about it. So yes, I had extremely positive experiences from the minority of people that I was running among.
Your kids must have thought it was pretty cool as well.
Oh, they were so proud of me. They all did little cute videos of support. I've got those on my Facebook page. Each one of them. My mom is running, because we use them in different kinds of social media and promotion. And so they each one had their own story about mom and what mom stood for and who mom was and how and why she's motivated to run in this conservative area and what motivates her to do good. And so they were awesome. They were very supportive.
What kind of law did you go into practicing?
I practice estate planning, which is wills and trusts and healthcare directives and that kind of thing.
Cool. Do you enjoy it?
I love it. I just love it.
What drew you to that?
It's not the contentious part of law. It's not a big fight.
Yeah.
You help people with the security of knowing that everything's in place. Even my tagline on my website is called "Love After Death," so that you love your people, and when you get your plan together, you can. I call it the peaceful sleep of the prepared, because And if you do it right, the people that you leave behind feel your love even after, you love them so much and you work so hard to make life good for them, and then you die and then it's a fucking hot mess. And if you get your plan
what does it look
together,
like when it goes wrong?
When it goes wrong,
yeah.
So I'm not sure how it works here in Australia. The government has a plan for your belongings after your death.
If you don't have your own plan.
If you don't have your own plan. And if you don't have any problem with the government going, okay, well, now here's the plan. On paper, it might be a sibling that you are fractured from. On paper, it might be, that they don't, if you're not married and you don't recognize your partner's stuck because your family can intervene. So, and then the court gets to make those decisions. And so if you have a plan, it makes things go so much better. Plus, you do it the way you want to do it. Plus, it gives you the opportunity to talk to your beloved people and say, guess what? Someday I'm going to die, and here's what I think I'm going to do. Here's what our plan is. Let's talk about it. Is everybody comfortable with that? Are we all okay with it? Do we all understand what's going to happen? And here's this big book, and it's on the shelf, and when something happens to me, you pull the big book off, and that's Mama's love for you, is knowing that it's going to be taken care of. I love the practice.
You see, I'm just picturing in my head all these, these movies, right, where they do the will reading, and then there's all the gasps.
Everybody's like this in the room. What am I going to get?
It's going to the housekeeper.
Yeah, I've watched that movie too. Yes. Yeah, there's great stories about that. And there are sometimes surprises, and that's when you sit down with somebody, and sometimes there are surprises in there. And so maybe you want to do that to your family. Maybe you do want to leave some surprises for your family. And sometimes when I work with people, I am surprised by what they want, but that's their plan and it's their belongings and they've worked hard for it and it's their family. So whatever their plan is, all I'm there to do is to advise them on how this is going to go down and how we can construct it so that can work.
So is this what you're doing for a day job now?
This is what I'm doing for my day job.
Your day job.
Yes.
And then you work with recovering from religion.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And what is that role? How did you get into that part firstly?
So I'm the executive director of Recovering from Religion. I got into that role when I first, as I came out, this was about 2011, I had a need after I had my dark year, after I came out, I had a real need to be around other non-believers. I really wanted the socialization. I just wanted to hear about it. So I went to, we have conventions all the time, American Atheist, American Humanist, different organizations have conventions. And I went to a convention and I met Dr. Darrell Ray, who's the president and founder.
Yes.
He established Recovering from Religion and just a couple of years prior to that, because he didn't really know what he wanted to do. He just knew there needed to be a space for people to unpack the baggage. They needed some support. They needed some resources. So it was only a 2-year-old organization when I met him. And as I watched it through the years, and it had developed a brilliant idea of a hotline, a telephone hotline. I watched what they were doing, and I really liked it. And then in 2015, the opportunity was available for me to apply to become the executive director. So I did, and have been doing it ever since.
How did the hotline work? You'd call up and say, "Hey,
it still
I don't believe anymore."
It still works that way. So we have the number is, the U.S. number is 84. I doubt it. That's what the number is, and they literally do that. Absolutely, wow. Andrew. They call and they go, "I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I don't think I believe this anymore. I don't have anybody to talk to. Nobody in my church. I can't talk to anybody." Those conversations, and that's a literal telephone hotline. We have an Australia number. It's right there at our website. But we also have an internet chat. So if an internet chat is your preference, you can schedule a call. There's any way we can. We have trained volunteers. Now, this is all peer support. We have trained volunteers ready to take those calls when you call and go, I'm broken and I'm stuck and I'm drinking a lot and I don't know how to hide from my problems, but I need some help and some resources.
It sounds a bit like Neo getting unplugged from the Matrix.
That is, you know what? That's not a bad analogy. It is Neo getting unplugged from the Matrix. And there are probably people who would rather take the red pill, and or the blue pill, or whichever one it is.
And I imagine, so when people go through that, it finally dawns on them and they don't think they believe anymore, a lot of them feel immediately so isolated.
Completely isolated.
All the people that they would talk to other people that they can't talk to about this.
Yes, and we talk when I talk about recovering from religion, and I try to tell people what the helpline is all about, the telephone and the chat line is all about. People will take anybody wherever they are, but most of the time they're isolated. The fractured relationships are the heartbreaking ones because that's the loss of the belief in this afterlife, the loss of the belief in this eternal parent, invisible parent that guides your life and has a plan for you. Yes, there's a loss for that, and we need to acknowledge that. But the real relationships, the families that are fractured, the parents that shun their children, the communities that turn their backs on people when you don't believe the way I believe and they're not going to associate with them anymore, that is heartbreaking. And it's devastating for some people. So, some people have to get kicked out of their homes. They have to start over. They find themselves without any resources. And it runs the gamut, as you would expect. So the hotline is there. The helpline is there to field those calls. And our mission statement is so straightforward. We provide hope, healing, and support to folks who are struggling with issues of doubt and non-belief.
So what's your role as an executive director? What do you do?
Sort of oversee the whole operation. We have so many moving parts with recovering from religion. Everything is all wrapped around providing that hope, help, and resources, the healing and resources. We have the 24-hour-a-day helpline, which is the internet chat and the telephone number. We have an online community where they can come in and talk to other people on a similar journey. We have local support groups where they can come together and tell their story and hear other stories. We have a weekend religion recovery retreat. There are so many things that we do. So my job is sort of as an overseer of all of those programs that try to help and try to answer the question, how can we help as you continue on this journey?
I think with that system, I think what gets the most usage? Is it the hotline, or is it a website?
It depends.
Or is it visiting in person?
So COVID affected us like it did everybody else. So pre-COVID, we probably had more in the way of our local support groups, because that's when people literally meet in a room and they tell their story, and they have a peer support moderator that leads them through the discussion.
Like an AA meeting, right?
A little bit like that. A little bit of a talking about it. Yes, yeah. And it's there's some rules. Everybody's gonna. You know, don't interrupt, and you've got to listen to other people's story, and we're not going to bash religion. I mean, they can tell their story, but we're careful not to collectively trash religion. So the support groups get a lot of use, but also during COVID, the helpline use just skyrocketed because people they're stuck now. Now, not only are they isolated, but now they're stuck in the home. They can't even go out and see any friends. And so we benefited from COVID. I don't mean to be cavalier about that, because I know how serious it was. But we benefited by COVID in that not only did we get a lot of clients that reached out to us and access the help that we offer, we had a lot of folks to come in to volunteer because everybody's going stir crazy. And this is and volunteering for recovering from religion you can do at your laptop, at your desk, on your own schedule, because we're a 24-hour support.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I saw in Australia they have this program called Crime Stoppers, which is like for people to report.
Sure. Rat out somebody else.
Snitch on people. But they've got like an app now. And I was thinking, like, who wants to get caught like using a Crime Stoppers app? I was thinking that's probably why you guys, I'm not sure if you guys have an app, but the recovering, you wouldn't have got to get caught if you hadn't left yet, Recovering from Religion app.
Well, and we're laughing about that. Yes, we're laughing about that. And there are some countries that we have the client who's reached out to us back out of the system and get some protection for their IP address. You know, you can not disclose your IP address. And so we're laughing about it, but we are really careful to protect the identity. We don't track our folks in the truest sense of the word. We only know the general area where they're calling from.
Yeah, but they're looking for a way to have a conversation with you guys and get advice and while leaving the smallest fingerprint possible, right?
That's right. And we try to work around that. If they abruptly leave a call or a chat, we understand that. We know what has happened. Someone's walked into the room.
Yeah,
so
like, what the hell, so
I
rude?
know,
You're like, we get
rude. But no, we completely understand that. And so that's another thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about, putting ourselves in the position of the client. They're, what else can we do to help them? Yes, maybe when we opened up an internet chat, we did it for a weird reason. It wasn't that we were trying to go global. We were trying to give people who couldn't find the privacy to have a phone call an option. So we thought, let's do an internet chat. Well, when we did that, we went worldwide, and that was awesome, and that's growth. But that was not even the motivation behind it. It was because we recognized sometimes they couldn't carve out the space or the time to even make a vocal phone call. So
yeah, wow. So it helps to have a few different options there.
Oh, as many options as possible. You can schedule a phone call. There's just a lot of ways that we try to provide help.
I saw on your, I think on Twitter, that you are a woman of many interests. Right?
Okay.
You're an iron woman?
I have done, yes. In fact, my first iron race that I ever did was in New Zealand. I had traveled to Lake Taupo. I did not complete that race. I had a struggle in the water, so I don't get to count that one. But I eventually got my Ironman in, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're doing that. I saw also that you're are you an active beekeeper?
Yes, I have bees. I have bees at my house. That goes along with the farming piece. I have about 5 acres in Oregon.
What's the trick to keeping bees?
Oh my gosh, there's no trick to keeping bees. I'm just fascinated by observing them. The honey is the least important of the whole thing. They're pollinators, and so if you're concerned about the environment, having
wear that big mask.
You do. There are certain times when you want to wear that. If you're just doing a small adjustment to the hive, bees are not out to get you. Do
you use smoke or something to mellow them out?
You have a smoking device that calms them down. It kind of gets them a little disoriented. So if they're agitated over some reason, sometimes too high of a temperature or a change of a queen, or if you're going to put another what's called a super onto the boxes. There's different things that agitate them. So there's times when you need the gear and the smoke, and there's times when you just, if you're making a small tweak or whatever, it's not a big deal. They're fascinating creatures.
My dad was a beekeeper
Was he?
long before I was born.
Oh.
When he first started dating my mum, and I think my mum was like, "Look, if we're gonna be a thing,
This is a deal breaker.
if we're gonna be a thing, you got to get rid of the bees." So.
Oh shoot! Oh yeah, I love them. I love them. But I'm a nurturer, and so I enjoy watching them. They are so they're such an elaborate, complicated community. You know they do the dances where they show each other where they're just interesting creatures, no question. They're fascinating creatures.
So you live on a farm now in Oregon?
Mm-hmm. It's 5 acres. Yeah, I consider it a farm. They're all freeloaders, the goats and the chickens.
What else? Yeah, what else you got? Goats, chickens. What
I got
else?
goats and chickens, and then I have cats and dogs, and then I have the bees. So I used to have when I lived in Tennessee. I had a little bigger farm, and I had bigger animals. I had donkeys and cattle. I'm really kind of past that. I don't really want to do that anymore. But I love having the goats
you
clear
passed the donkeys and the cattle.
the big animals. They're
yeah.
just a lot of work, and the goats serve a purpose. They clear the countryside. They keep the blackberries down, and then the chickens, of course, give you
Something like a
eggs.
cheap lawnmower.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I love them too.
Yeah.
And a big garden, and that whole lifestyle just appeals to me.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So as a lawyer, do you have to go into an office, or can you just work from home?
I do everything from home.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Sometimes if I'm going to do so when you do the estate planning the way that I do it, you get really involved in your clients' lives because they're telling you every intimate detail about their finances, and they're asking you for guidance.
Buried.
Where the money's where the money's going, where the money is, and so you have to. It creates a real sense of intimacy with them, and so and I like that. I want them to feel that way. So when I meet with them, for them to sign their paperwork, and we are going to do the book. We even do a little bit of a legacy interview where they I record them telling their favorite childhood memory and what it was like, and it's all part of the package of the love that they're showing for their loved ones after they're gone. So even the little thumb drives goes into the big book. Mm-hmm. That's the book on the shelf that when shit goes sideways and when it goes down, we get the book out and everything's taken care of.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. It's a really cool thing.
That must be a relatively unique piece of the puzzle that you're.
There are some people that practice that way. Yeah, everybody individualizes how they practice, but it's just what's worked for me.
Do you ever look back at you've got all these passions and interests and this active life, and you're doing law, and just think how none of this in another pathway of your life, none of this would have come to pass.
I think about it all the time. I think about it all the time, and I want, as the executive director of Recovering from Religion, I want people to see. I want to be respectful of their journey, and I want them to understand that I know it's not easy. I know that there's a loss when you lose your faith. You lose the security of thinking you have it figured out. The ground is not stable for you. You even lose when you drop the concept of God. You lose that love. You think you are beloved. You think God created you. You think God sent his son to die for you. You lose that. So I don't want to seem cavalier to people on their journey, but at the same time, I want them to see that life is kick-ass, and leaving religion, you can have a happy, healthy, productive, joyful life with no religion at all. And so I'm conscious of being visible. I'm visible in my position as an executive director, and I don't ever want to be fake and Christian-y, which is what I did in the other life with everything's perfect all of the time. I don't want to quite go that far, but I want them to see that owning your own life and owning your own individuality and who you want to be and what legacy you want to leave behind is a joy all on its own that you don't get in religion. So I think about it all the time, about what my life is like.
Do you think it would have happened this way if you didn't have kids, pesky kids that ask too many questions, right?
Bratty kids trying to. No, I don't know. Who's to say? Maybe someday. I feel like I I would like to think that I would have figured it out, because I would like to think I'm a smart enough person to go, this is just shit. This is stupid. This isn't reasonable. It's anti-science. I mean, right now, and I'm careful not to. I'm not very careful right now. I'm careful not to bash religion, because I get where everybody is, but I would like to think I would have figured it out. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe it just accelerated the timeline.
It probably, I'm sure it accelerated the timeline, no question.
And I think the amazing piece for you was that when you did leave, while obviously it was hard with your immediate family and friends, but you had your kids as a network that was so supportive, right?
No question,
and
no
so
question. And when people call into the helpline, and you start to they share with you details of their life, and people who have no one, and I tell you, I have a little piece of jealousy when people do it together, when a couple does it together, because they have each other.
Yeah.
And to me, that was a big loss. It was a big loss. I still care deeply for the man who was my husband. I still deeply care for him, and so I have a bit of sadness. But sometimes, when they tell you their story, and if you can identify they have this support person and this support person, you know what? That's what we're going to build on. That's enough to, you need to draw on that. And recovering from religion support groups are there. And so even though in the beginning you don't know these people and you're sharing your story, deep, profound friendships are sometimes made out of these support groups.
You must be familiar with instances to that point of people that leave, but they feel so isolated that they go back.
That can happen. And sometimes it's even a go back and go back and go back and go back. It's back and forth for a long, long time. Everybody's journey is different. And I understand there are circumstances where I think people should stay. And I'll tell you what those are. If you're a young adult and you're dependent upon your family for your education, you may be 18 even. You may be able to make your own decision, but your entire education depends upon your parents funding it. We don't give advice on the helpline. That's not our job. We're not counselors. We're peer support. But as we talk them through their options, that would be one of the times when we would want them to think seriously about the cost of leaving. Letting them identify for themselves, life will go on. If after your college education, when you're not dependent upon your parents for your education anymore, you will have the freedom to be able to make your own decisions. And while, as I said, we don't give advice, those would be circumstances where it probably would behoove the young person to play the game for as long as they can to get as much education out of the family as they can.
Yeah. It's a kind of... It's a spectrum, isn't it? There's no
right.
There's no black or white.
That's right. That's right.
That they might be better off continuing with those questions while also helping set up their own future as much as possible.
That's right. That's right. And that's why there are circumstances when we completely understand somebody not leaving. We get it. We've all been there. It's not easy. Yes, it's going to cost you. Yes, it's hard. Yes, it's so much better on this side, but they don't know that yet. And it's not my job to tell them maybe their life won't be better on this side. That's not. Every story is not happily ever after in leaving religion either, because life happens. That's the strength of not being religious. Life is going to happen to you whether you're a religious person or not. So sometimes tragedy befalls you, even if you don't have religion. So life doesn't work that way.
But you're saying if you're 18 and you've got, not enough education, no real skills, and you're also isolated from everyone, then suddenly it can make life a lot harder.
It can make it even harder than it is, yes. And so sometimes that would be a time when we would want the young person to consider seriously what the options are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how often do you get to catch up with your kids now?
Oh, all the time. I talk to my kids every day.
That's cool.
And I live, and that was one of the things that was the impetus for me to leave Tennessee and relocate out in the Pacific Northwest in the U.S. because all my kids are out there. And as I said, we're close and we get along and we do vacations together and weekends together. And the kids are I just was so fortunate. The kids are just great kids. Their partners are great partners. We really enjoy each other's company. So, yeah, I get to see them a whole lot more now.
It sounds like you live a happy life now, like much happier than compared to that horrible year when you were trying to live a life.
Compared to the horrible year, and even compared to the years prior to that, when it wasn't horrible, but it was restrictive and controlled, and I look at people living a religious life now, can people live a joyful life within religion? Yes, and there are personalities that do better than others.
Yeah.
Some of us don't do well with authoritarian, commands and controls, and some of us
some do.
and some do. Honestly, some do. Some people, that's just nature. That's just the nature of different personalities.
I remember talking to Naomi Mura, and she said that one of the things she enjoyed was just like them telling you everything you meant to do. The regimented life can be
makes it easy if you're that kind of a person. If you don't question
when
it,
suddenly you got the freedom to do anything, you're like, oh God, what do I do?
hell, I got to make my own decisions. I've got it. Yes,
Yeah.
Yes. So that's why we have so much compassion for people whenever they're stuck in religion. So it's not terrible for everybody. And I'll tell you, because of the male dominated nature of a lot of Abrahamic religions, it isn't as hard for men. They're on the top of the food chain. They're not restricted from doing this, and they get to tell everybody else what to do, and they get to have a spouse that serves them. There's a lot of benefit to that. So it's not the same for everybody, and religions are not the same. Some are far more repressive than others. We know that.
What's the first piece of advice you give to anyone when they say to you that they're having doubts about their religious beliefs?
Well, I have a cheating answer, and that's to contact Recovering from Religion, because these are people, trained volunteers, most of whom have an experience similar to yours, that have some resources and some suggestions and some comfort to offer you.
All right. So imagine you're on the hotline one day and they call. Then what do you say?
Well, we would have a conversation, and I would do a lot of asking questions. I would be sensitive to where they are. I would try to listen between the lines or read between the lines if it's an internet chat to see exactly what they're saying. I would try to see where they are. What is it that they're asking for? Do they just need a little bit of support and encouragement, or do they need resources? Our resources tab is thousands of resources, podcasts and books and things. And so maybe I would say, here's one of, maybe they're struggling with, I'm not in church, but I'm struggling with how to raise my kids to be moral kids. That's a common secular person's issue. We all want to do the right thing by raising our kids. So I would listen to hear what their question is. If they're deep, deep in religion, I would try to find out where they are with it. Tell me what made you have your doubts. What are you doubting, and why are you doubting that? What evidence do you see that's made you reconsider something that you used to believe in? So, and that is all when we train our volunteers, we train them from top to bottom in exactly what you've just asked. It's how do you deal with a person when they call in and you have no idea where they are and where they're coming from. So that's all part of the process.
I think, it's similar to doing a podcast, right? You get people to start talking and
Yeah.
then the questions start to present themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a conversation. It's just a conversation. Yeah.
So what's next for you? What are the things that are you going to run for office again?
I might. If my community needs me, I'll run for office. I haven't done that on the West Coast. I did that in Tennessee. But if that's where my community needs me, I will do that. I'll continue to do my law practice. I love that. The reason I'm in Australia is we're continuing to develop RFR. We want to make as many features of RFR available to the folks in Australia as we have in the U.S. So that's part of what I'm here for.
Are the problems that you talk to people about regarding religion and questioning their faith any different in Australia and America?
We're pretty close. The two cultures are pretty close. The issues seem to be aligned because the religions are aligned. It's Christianity, it's Jehovah's Witness, it's Catholicism. We can cover all of those. So they seem to be pretty similar. I haven't noticed a drastic difference in the culture.
Are there any specific denominations that seem to be to draw the most people towards?
Well, I'll tell you
religion?
that the ones that have a philosophy, and I'll put two in the category: the Mormons and the JWs, who have a theology of the word is disfellowshipping or shunning, where part of the teaching is to tell the people that are still in the religion to completely turn their backs on the ones that have left. Those are tough ones. My family didn't turn their back on me. They were disappointed in me. They were critical of me, but they didn't do the shunning or the disfellowshipping, as it's called.
Well, I mean, it seems pretty close, not that far off. I mean, your friends didn't want.
Well, yes, maybe not far off with friends, but family is a little bit of a different story. And they were not. My family was not commanded. They're commanded to continue to pray for me. They're commanded to continue to witness to me, but they are not commanded biblically to turn their back. Yeah, and so those cases, as I've been in Australia for the last couple of weeks, I've heard story after story after story, and the ones that lose everything with their family turning their backs on them, those are particularly heartbreaking.
It must make you feel proud to be working with an organisation like that, which can help to support people through what is such a difficult time in their life. Right?
So you heard me say how much I love my law practice, and I really enjoy my law practice, and it's very gratifying, and I love helping people. But I always say this: the work that I do with recovering from religion is the most gratifying thing I've ever done. It's the most because I have sensed that sense of desperation and isolation.
You felt it.
I have felt it. It is so personal to me, and we have worked so hard at establishing a method to try to help people that it's effective. We're having success. Not that we're trying to pull people out of religion, but we're trying to give them a place to ask their questions. We're trying to give them resources when they're doing it. We respect their journey. We respect where they are. And because we do it that way, we're not counting ticks on the wall of how many people we've deconverted. It's just we're trying to help people on their journey, and it's the best thing I've ever done.
Quality over quantity.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. And it's been and I share that. The volunteers share with me that they're experiencing that same thing too. So we feel like we have it pretty dialed in on being able to offer support. We support, and we don't push. So that's threading a needle, I think, and we've sort of got that dialed in.
Any more marathons coming up?
I'd do another one. Several years ago, one of my kids, my second son, said to me, "Mom, I want to train to do an Ironman with you before you get too old." Thanks, honey. Okay, and we did do it together. And now my grandson's calls me Gammy. He said, "Gammy, do you think you got another Ironman in you?" Because now he's 18, and so now because you can't do an Ironman until you're 18. Now he's 18. He's like, "Could you do one more?" And I said, "Yes, I could do one more." So yeah, sure. I'll do another one of those.
Are there any bodies of water near Oregon for you to go swimming in?
It's on the coast.
Oh, is it? Okay. I don't know.
Yeah, and you know.
Sorry, I don't know my U.S. geography well enough.
That's okay. Most of the races are not in the ocean. No, you just do it in a lake. Yeah, there's plenty enough bodies of water to find. And sometimes you do a destination race. It's not that you do a race in your area. You go to a place to do the race. Yeah, so, yeah. My family goes. I have a daughter in Las Vegas, and there's a Las Vegas half marathon. It's actually a full marathon and a half marathon right down the strip. They close it to cars, and you go right down the strip, and you do it in the evening, so it's called Strip at Night because we're funny.
Yeah.
But there's 40,000 runners, and so the family gets together and does that. We've done that one for years.
So do all your kids live in the U.S.?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm. And they live close to where I am. All of them live close to where I am in the Pacific Northwest.
Nice.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, Gayle, thank you very much for coming in.
I can't tell you what a delightful conversation this has been, Andrew. Thank you so much.
No worries at all. Absolute pleasure. This has been another episode of Shit's Gone Sideways.
Shit's Gone Sideways.